Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Sunday chat today will include a Genus Spotlight at the end, as usual. Right, news and stuff. Well, there isn't much really. I'm still having to put up with the football because I would say unfortunately, I don't really mean it, but England actually won their match, so they're now in the semi-finals. So it's still constantly dominating the news. At a level that I don't believe it should be. It's just sport. It's not national or international news. Yeah? They're still going on about the election despite it being over and done with. Literally over and done with a couple of days ago now, and they're still going on about it. But there again, the results were exceptionally unusual and historic in the amount of movement from one party to another. So, well, like I've always said, like when Boris got in, at the same time or similar time as another blondie got in, and I said, you know, okay blondie, you've done the talk, now do the walk. And it applies to this lot as well. They say they've totally changed and they're going to do marvellous things. Where have I heard that before? Oh yeah, every time we get a new one in, they say they're going to do marvellous things. They say they're going to do lots of things. How much actually gets done? Nowhere near what they say they're going to do. So all you can do is judge how much of what they said they're going to do they actually get done. I mean, poor old Boris, if he hadn't had a pandemic to contend with, I think he might even still be there. But he won the election, him, not his words and everything like that. He, the person, won that election back then, and they never found anything like him to replace him. Irrespective of which party, at that time he was a good leader, and that's what it took. This time round, it's taken many failures to leave the other one standing out. The person was not exceptional, but because of all the so-called catastrophes on the other side of the fence, it left that one standing out as, well, that's all we've got then, isn't it? There is a little bit a talk, a whispering in the media that these results indicate that our system is not exactly ideal. So maybe the system will get talked about, because it is, as far as I'm concerned, it's just grossly unfair. It's grossly unfair because the number of votes are not reflected in the number of seats. And you sort of think, well, how does that happen then? Well, it just does. It's like me, here where I live, I go in to vote at the national election. I'm not voting for those two, or three, or four. I'm voting for the little man here, in this little area, who nobody's ever heard of. And he might be brilliant and do wonderful things, and he will represent a party, but that's not who's going to run the country. That's just going to have a voice in this little area. And that's the bit that's wrong. There should be a way of voting for the national party and the heads of that party, the leader and the main people that can affect our lives dramatically. That's who we should be voting for. That's where the ticks in the boxes should go. But, you know, that's not how it is. And how it is what we're stuck with until somebody's got the whatnots to change it, or to instigate some change. That would take years. Anyway, so those are the two big talking topics at the moment, and they will stay like that for a while yet. Yeah, so not much of interest on the news for me at the moment. I know what's going on in the background that ought to be in the news, but it's taken third or fourth place at the moment. So again, that's how it is. You think we've had a dramatic cost of living increase. You can blame that on who or whatever you like. Nonetheless, it's happened. Irrespective of, pointing fingers, it has happened. So what's the only way we can get round that? Oh, we're going to do wonders. We'll improve the cost of living. No, you won't. All these things that are costing a lot more, are you going to get them to come down in price? Of course not. You go in the supermarket, if a bag of sugar is £2, it's not suddenly going to become £1.50, is it? It's not going to happen. The prices have increased. The rate at which they're increasing has come right down. Brilliant. It doesn't stop them going up though, and it doesn't take away the amount they've already gone up. That's the important thing. So our cost of living, how can we solve it then? Well, the only way to solve it and get people back into a reasonable life again, where they're not penny pinching every single time they open their purse or their wallet, is for them to have more money to spend. Sort that out then. How do you do that then? Well, they'll have to be paid more. Well, who's going to pay them more then? Well, they're the employers. Where are they going to get the money from? Yeah. The answers are not straightforward and easy, or they would have already been done, wouldn't they? What we've got to do is stop huge companies creaming it off and spending it on their own bonuses and golden handshakes and huge payouts that many of them haven't really earned at all, and perhaps distribute a little bit better and more evenly. That's been attempted before and that didn't work either. No easy answers. Right, stuff coming up, not a lot. This weekend's my first weekend without anything going on for a bit. Next weekend I'm off to Burnham's, hopefully with Hannah. I haven't got my calendar. I won't get my calendar. No, I won't bother. At the beginning of next month is a bonsai fair. It's an open air event in a field. I went to one a while back, but then they got cancelled. The venue, people bailed out and wouldn't, the entrance wasn't big enough to get vans and stuff in, basically. So, but it's on again this time. I will be going to that, so that's something to film. That's bonsai stuff, so that will be on the other channel. But it's just, it is coming up, and that is the beginning of August. I think it's whatever the first Sunday is in August. I think it's the 4th. So that'll be a day out. It's not a million miles away either. It'll take about an hour and a half to get to. I enjoy a drive like that. You set off at a reasonable time. It says it opens at 9. I'll get there at 8 because I've been there before. If you get there early, they don't want you blocking the road, so they let you in. Not everybody knows, don't they? Yes, they do now. So there's that coming up. And then there's I've said about the Burnham's event. There aren't any more orchid events for some time after that, not until end of September. There's quite a big gap. But time flies, so they say. As far as my workload is concerned, this is in theory my highest workload, on the grounds that when we've got normal British summer weather, I shouldn't say that, should I? This is normal British summer weather. It's nearly lunchtime. I've had to wait until now to be able to film for the actual rain to stop and give it a flipping rest. It's been at it since I got up. Mojo's been sat by the door with his legs crossed for over an hour at one point. He did eventually go out, but obviously he's a cat. He doesn't enjoy getting soaking wet if he can avoid it. But yeah, we're in for that sort of weather now. We're back to the showers and sunny spells, and not that warm. Temperatures have dropped right down. Daytime temperatures now, we're lucky to get 20. Now I get a little bit more than 20 in here because there's an effect through the glass, and I get quite a bit more than that if I get the sun on the roof, which is just coming round now. But then it only gets up to a high temperature if that sun stays on the roof for a long period of time. If it comes and goes, I get a nice relatively steady temperature in here, which is what I want really. Don't want it jumping up and down. So that's that. My watering frequency is obviously greater, depending on ambient temperatures over periods of days. If I get one really warm day where the sun stays on the roof for its entire time that it's available, that's a warm day. I'll be up, I can be heading up 27, 28 degrees in here. And the humidifier will be giving it some, and so will the fan. And it becomes a more expensive day because there's a lot more electricity getting used, but it's still nothing like trying to keep it warm in the winter. That's where my big expense comes. And yeah, I mean, the heater is still set at night to 16 degrees, but it rarely comes on because of the residual heat hangs around in here. The nights are so short, by the time the temperature's starting to drop, it's daytime again. And I'm up and the door's open, so not really spending anything on heating at the moment, just airflow and humidity. And I think some of my troubles when I moved house were based on trying to maintain a humidity level that I used to have around the other place and forgetting that the temperatures weren't there. You're trying to run 80, 85, 90% humidity when you're only at 20 degrees, you're probably going to get some problems. And I think that was part of the issues, of the transition. So some days now I don't have the humidifier on, and it sits at around 65 to 70, up to about 22, 23 degrees. That's fine. There are a few plants in here that might like the humidity a bit higher, some that are really not fussed one way or the other, so like I've said, everything has to get the same as far as that's concerned. I can vary light, but humidity, temperatures and airflow, everybody gets the same. I can only adjust light, really. I could adjust fine tuning by moving plants perhaps nearer to the fan, so that they got a bit more airflow than those farther away or those behind other plants. But the difference is the fan isn't there to blast the plants, it's there to move the air around the plants, not have them all sat there like that in the wind. That's not the general idea. So yes, tomorrow is Everything in Bloom on the 8th, and it's going to be Phalaenopsis Day, basically, because I've got the 8 mini phals that I bought. Obviously they're all still in bloom, and I've got other phals that are in bloom now as well, including the only species, the Equestris. That's actually Hannah's, but nonetheless it's here and it's in bloom. There's a few things gone over in here, but there are still a few things that are not Phalaenopsis here. Not much. But we'll be doing that tomorrow. It's quite good when there's a lot of Phalaenopsis because they haven't got names. They're just hybrids, so I don't have to mess about with pop-ups so much. However, all of them have a tag now. Yeah? Hannah's ones in the main have got names. Yeah, they were bought with names. But my ones that are just basically hybrids, I think there's one or two might have a proper name, but not many. They've now got a tag with a letter on that matches up to the description of their blooms and things in my notes, so that I can keep track of ones that have been repotted and things like that, or when the blooms finish on a particular one, so that I can keep my notes up to date. But to do that I have to be able to identify them all, so they've all got a letter now instead of a name. So it's the quickest and easiest way I could think of doing it, basically. Right, so that's that. Health stuff, there's nothing to report, just keep taking the tablets. The cholesterol tablets I'm not taking every day, I take them now and again, I'm going to call it. Basically they're not supposed to be taken with alcohol, and obviously I I have some wine over the weekend, so I just don't take the tablets. If I've had any wine, I don't take those tablets, but it advises not to. And looking at potential problems with all three of the types of tablets that I've got, the ones I take for cholesterol have got the biggest list of potential things that can, you know, side effects they're called, aren't they? Things that change that wouldn't have done if you weren't taking the tablets, side effects. And so I'm trying to keep them down a bit. First opportunity I get to discuss that with a proper doctor of the medical profession, not also rands and ne'er-do-wells and strange websites that, you know, come out of the blue at such times. I will discuss that and see if I can get them stopped, because I'm still not sure they're necessary. You have to bear in mind, I was put in the rapid access slot of our NHS service. That means now. Stop everything, deal with this person now. And I got dealt with rapidly. It was all good stuff. And the first thing to do was to get me on medication for everything that could possibly be wrong. You know, so that was my heart rate because of the AF that I've got. It was also my blood pressure, and it was also potentially my cholesterol. So you hit all three straight away. And then my blood test came back and said my cholesterol's not actually that bad, but nothing's changed since then. So we will try and deal with that. My weight issue, which is the thing, obviously that's down to me. That's up to me to control. I want to do it. I will pursue it, and my diet changes are for my physical health, my heart, blood pressure, everything else. But part of it is to lose weight. We've had what goes with the doldrums, what goes with don't feel like doing anything. Chucking stuff in there, that's what goes with that, doesn't it? So I haven't had a good week, and we actually put on some weight earlier on, but as of today I've got back to where it was earlier last week. So we've lost 9 pounds. You can work that out in kilos yourself. I should be doing it in kilos really, but I can't picture, you know, if somebody says, oh, that person's 170 kilos, I haven't got a clue what they look like. You know, they could be a barrel, they could be skinny as a rake, 8 foot tall, 3'6". I don't know. It doesn't mean anything to me because that's not what I grew up with. So I still do stones and pounds. But I'm thinking of getting some new scales because mine aren't accurate. And they're not only not accurate, I know that because when I came home from the doctors, I'd been weighed on presumably accurate scales, you'd think, wouldn't you? And I tried weighing myself on my scales and it was nearly a stone out. So whereas, you know, well, is it about 2/3 of a stone, about 10 pounds, something like that. And they were weighing light. So they still show whether I'm going up or down, but I've also noticed if I get on them and take a reading and get off and come back in a couple of minutes and do it again, it's not the same reading. So they're not even accurate within themselves when nothing's changed. So I'm thinking of getting a new set of scales, a digital set, which presumably are more accurate. Well, I presume they are. One would think. There's not springs and boings and needles and that flapping around. So, but yeah, it is something that's important to me, is to know how much I actually weigh and how much I'm changing and actually dropping the weight down. I know what my goal is, and it's pretty horrendous compared with what I've done so far, in as much as I'm not even halfway yet, not even halfway. And we've been doing it, whatever it is now, 5 weeks, something like that. So it's a long way to go, and it's, as many people have suggested, it's a long, slow process. If you try and do it too quick, it'll only come back on. So that's what's going on that front. Just sort of, like I said, keep taking the tablets and keep at the diet. And by keeping at the diet, I've also reduced portions quite dramatically. Because whereas like I used to have, you know, a lot of the things I'm eating now as part of this diet, I was eating anyway. you know, like plenty of fish, plenty of light coloured meats, pork, chicken, that sort of thing. Occasional duck breasts. So, you know, fish and meat. I've added in the eggs that weren't there before. They've replaced the bread and the butter and all that sort of stuff. But then when I used to have fish, I'd also have half a plate full of potatoes. They're just gone. So that leaves the fish, and instead of peas I've switched to green beans because they're less starchy and still good for you. So there's still some green veg there. But the potatoes are missing. Well, that also means that portion is a lot smaller. I'll still have a curry, but not the rice. That means the portion's smaller. So just by cutting out the rice, the pasta, the bread and the potatoes, my portions have automatically gone down. So the amount that gets stuffed in there. So remember a comedian once said, you'll get fat as long as that hole there is bigger than somewhere else. Or as Ricky Gervais says, if you keep putting more in there than you need, you will gain weight. Don't forget need, yeah? More than you need. Each person's an individual. The amount of food they need to maintain everything the way it ought to be is different for each person. Yeah? We're all different. But there are some rules and some guidelines and all stuff like that. So, and I'm not having any trouble sticking to the diet. Oh, I cut crisps out as well because they were always sat there. You know, you sort of, I'm just going to go out in the garden, I'll just have a packet of crisps before I go, I'm feeling a bit peckish. Well, if they're there, then you go at them, don't you? Well, they're not there now, I don't buy them anymore, so they're not there. So that's another thing that's gone missing. But yeah, they are replaced mainly with lots of different types of nuts. And you can eat too many nuts in as much as they have got calories, they're not calorie free. Some of them are quite high in calories. Things like Brazil nuts, they reckon there's enough oil and fat in a Brazil nut that you could light it with a match if you wanted to and it would burn. I don't know that for a fact, but yeah, a variety of nuts, and it's much better to have a small handful of nuts if you're peckish than a bag of crisps. Or chips, I think they're called in other parts of the world, but we call them crisps. It's still potatoes, and the problem with them is not just the potatoes. Most of them are cooked in some sort of oil, and they've got lots of salt. That's something I don't add salt to anything. Nothing. Zero. So no extra salt gets added to anything. There are natural salts in some of the food I eat. If I'm eating sea fish, it's probably got some salt in it. Natural salt, you know, can't take it out. But I don't add salt to anything. I smother things in pepper, but not salt. Because again, that's a blood pressure issue, salt, so we've got rid of that. And I got rid of this part of my lapse of sticking to my diet, I got rid of something in the freezer during the week that's been sat there tempting me. I got rid of my last pizza. Now they're bad news, they really are bad news. The salt content is outrageous. It's like something like 2/3 of your daily intake in the pizza, in one part of your daily sort of stuff. So it's gone now and I won't buy any more. So the temptation gets removed. So that's that. So I'm quite enjoying the new diet, and I know it's having an effect because the belt that I wear with my jeans, and I wear jeans virtually all the time, I have quite a few different pairs, but they're all the same size, so therefore I use the same belt. And they were getting to the point where I was having to heave to get the little thing in the hole. But I couldn't use the next one because it wouldn't be tight enough. Well, that hole now doesn't hold my trousers up properly. I'm forever doing this all day long, hoiking them up, as I call it. So there's been some inches starting to go, as well as the physical weight. and that is the goal, is to get rid of this hanging over the top of my trousers and get back to a shape I once was until recent years. And then there's a whole load of clothes in my wardrobe that I'll be able to wear again, that are all shoved up one end. No, can't get into that anymore. No, not very comfortable, too tight. Yeah? Well, they can all come up into the I can wear these again category. So it's like getting a new wardrobe without spending any money. I like that. I like that a lot. Having just said that, I have just bought a couple of new shirts, but mainly because the ones I've got, not ones like these are everyday shirts, I mean they haven't changed much. But the normal sort of smarter sort of shirts that you wear if you're going somewhere nice and meeting people and stuff like that, they're starting to look tired. You know, you can only wash clothes so much, and then they start getting dull and jaded. You know, whites head towards grey, and what was a nice bright blue is becoming a dull blue and things like that. So yeah, I always have a couple of new shirts. That's good. Right, so that's all that. As I said, the maintenance out here is probably at its peak at the moment, and it's still not that bad. There are days when I will miss watering the few mounts that I've got on the grounds that they've had no heat, and the fan hasn't been on with the airflow because I haven't had any heat, and they're still damp from the day before. So that gives them a chance to totally dry before they get watered the next day. Come winter time, they'll go to, well, some of them are resting types of dendrobium, so they won't get watered virtually at all, and some of the others probably go down to once a week. The pots are at their maximum frequency, but that's still not much. The main pots, the non-cooler shadiest set as I call them, they're about every 6 or 7 days now. That's not often, and some of those will be quite dry at that point, and some will be still damp, and some might even be still wet and get left. So they got to wait until the next round. So not that busy. Not as busy as some anyway, let's put it that way. Right, let's get on to some orchids, and we'll have a chat about a genus. We'll do a genus spotlight, but before I start picking orchids up and pointing them at the camera, I'd like to finish my coffee. What I will show you before we move on to that is this. This is the broken spike, the one that the fan took off the shelf. Well, the fan didn't take this one off the shelf, it took off the flipping dendrobium, which then took this one off, and the spike broke. Well, you'd hardly know now. So all the buds are pushing on. The fact that that spike lost its tip means there's only half as many blooms, but doesn't show that much, does it? So we will still have these gorgeous red blooms in the they're not big blooms, they're medium oncidium type blooms. So they should be out soon, possibly another week, maybe a bit less. We'll see those. Nice splash of red, you know I like my reds. Right, so we're going to have a chat about Miltonias. Now, first of all, Miltonias are in the Oncidium Alliance. They are incorporated into an awful lot of intergeneric hybrids. Literally a lot. They add a certain type of shape and in some cases some vigour into the plants. And often bloom size as well. Some of the Miltonias do have good sized blooms in the Oncidium world, you know. So they can add sizes. A lot of or true Oncidiums, not mixed with anything else, have actually got quite small blooms. So by adding Brassias, Miltonias and some of the other alliance genera, you increase bloom size but perhaps maintain fragrance, something like that. Some Miltonias are fragrant, but not all. Some are quite fragrant actually, but some have got no fragrance at all. So it varies. Colours on Miltonias, from virtually white, the palest of pinks, through to deep purples, browns, yellows, autumn colours, that type of thing. I suppose you could say an awful lot are in that sort of yellow with brown tinges type category, and then there's an awful lot that are shades of pinks and purples as well. You do occasionally get a mix there where you'll get the sort of shades of brown with perhaps some yellow markings and a pink lip or a purple lip, but that would often be a hybrid, yeah, so you merge some colours together. As far as the genus is concerned, most of the species are classed as warmer growers. Go careful what you read and where you read it. I was looking at a care sheet on the American Orchid Society, and still in 2024 they are merging Miltoniopsis in with Miltonias. They are not another type of Miltonia, they are an entirely separate species. Come from a different part of the world, totally different environmental for where they grow. They're just different. They are not Miltonias. How the hell they ever got grouped in with Miltonias, I really don't know. Perhaps they ran out of ideas for words, but they're not Miltonias. Totally different plant altogether. They're different to look at, the leaves are a different colour, the blooms are totally different, and they come from cooler cloud forest environments. Miltonias, however, are often classed as top end of intermediate, bordering on warm. Some go into the warm temperature range. So these are not cool growers, they are up the warmer end. And unlike Miltoniopsis, they also like pretty good light. They have very thin leaves, Miltonias, and as a consequence, direct sun on those leaves is not a good idea, especially through glass. They can burn quite easily, and a dramatic change from shade into just bright light, even without the sun, can actually damage their leaves. Their colour of their leaves should be a palish green, but still green. If you're looking at your leaves and they look more yellow than green, too much light, cut it back. It weakens the plant, if nothing else, because it's constantly trying to battle to get its colour right again, and get its colour balance with the chlorophyll production and everything. So edge of green, but not yellow, and a palish green. Dark green leaves on Miltonias are just very rare. It's a colour they don't normally have. The other thing, I'll wait till I get some plants out. But yeah, so good light, but don't go too mad, and they are quite fine rooted plants. They're not big chunky roots in the main. Some of them have quite fine roots. So I always sort of think in the Oncidium range, you adjust your media to suit the roots. So if you've got a very fine rooted Miltonia, I would use quite a fine mix. You know, a small bark and perlite type mix, or perhaps with some charcoal in it or something like that, but quite small, yeah, to go with that fine root system. Some of them do have a more heading up towards medium, not chunky, but medium type roots. Well, they can have some large bark in the mix, yeah? So adjust your mix accordingly. Some of them do incredibly well mounted, and the reason they do incredibly well mounted implies they don't do very well in a pot. They can grow just as well in a pot, but they try and do that. They try and get out of the pot. They have a tendency to climb, which means a new growth starts, but it puts on a bit of rhizome before the actual growth gets going, and it ends up with a gap underneath where the new growth is. So the rhizome extends, and then often the roots, unless everything's right with humidity and everything else, the roots will lose their tips and not make it as far as the media. So you have to build the media up or tip the plant over slightly. However, if they're on a mount, they tend to grow upwards rather than downwards. So if you're going to put them on a mount, they need quite a long mount, and start them off right at the bottom with the roots they've got, and you'll find the new growths will head upwards. But because they're on a mount, the roots should get straight into whatever media you've got on the mount, probably moss. They don't like to be soggy, but then that really goes for most orchids, doesn't it? Soggy roots, soggy bottoms, not a good idea. And some of them will require a bit of a rest after blooming, because the new growths don't start straight away. Some of them, the new growths are already well on their way while the blooms are still there. So you have to look at the individual plant and see what's going on. Roots usually come on the new growths when they're partly grown. Difficult, again, it varies from plant to plant. Some have got virtually a mature growth and the bulb's even starting to form before the roots start. And others, the roots start while the growth is still quite young, just a few sort of inches long, or 10 centimetres, something like that. But it varies from plant to plant. And again, your ideal repotting time is either just before those roots start, if you know your own plant well enough to predict that, or wait till you see them. And don't let them get too long, because when they're relatively young, they are quite fragile, and during the potting process you might end up breaking some of those new tips off. Most of them have branching root systems, but just don't take the risk, don't damage your roots. I would like to say they're priceless, but they're not quite that precious. But some Miltonias do lose older roots as a progression. So as the plant progresses, the older roots are not really supported much. Now if they're not disturbed in any shape or form and the media's okay, they will live. But once the media starts to go, those older roots are the first things to just collapse. So when you get to repot, you often find the back end of the plant has just got dead roots hanging off it. That's normal, that is often the case. However, you shouldn't have lost the latest set of roots when you come to repot. Those are what I call precious. Those need looking after. Right, I have a few Miltonias. I'm going to say at the beginning, most of them are actually in a state of rescue to one degree or another. I don't have a shining example of a Miltonia to show you. In a lot of cases, they were once really large plants, started to grow out of the pot, and I split them up into several plants, took the older parts off and put them back in a pot. So quite a few of them are several plants in a single pot. Some have been struggling for some time, and at times in the past they've been on the edge of the bin, not far off, and then they decide to start growing again, so they get given a chance. So these are not all good plants. Right, last couple of mouthfuls. Stone cold, that means this video's been going on far too long. Not too bad. We will go over them relatively quickly. Now I've got to pick these up to find out if they're actually Miltonias. They're all here, so they're all behind me. That shelf and that shelf, but not all of the plants are Miltonias. This is Miltonia Summer Glory. This is a Miltonia. This is in a state of rescue, hence the excess of moss. This has two new growths. Yeah? They are hanging in there. At the moment, they're hanging in there. So this looks like it's going to recover okay. The only thing that will stop that recovering is if that moss stays too wet and starts getting a bit soggy, those new growths will probably rot off at the base. Yeah? They need to go into the media to encourage the roots to grow, but if that media remains too wet, they could rot. So it is recovering. That's Miltonia Summer Glory. Most of these will have bloomed. I'll put pop-ups of the blooms so that you see what why I'm bothering, should we say. That was also a gift from a friend. So that's that one. And this one don't look too clever, the next one. I was just going to say, especially as it's got a couple of dead leaves, but one of them fell off and the other one is actively falling off. It's getting encouraged to fall off. I better get the scissors out actually, I'm tearing it. Or use two hands, that's better. Right, so this one is Miltonia regnellii. So this is a species. This was once a huge plant and actually got second place on an Orchid Society competition table during a monthly meeting. That was at an Orchid Society I no longer belong to, so that's how long ago it was. So this has a new growth. It is being rescued yet again, hence the emphasis on the moss. And I do believe over here, yes, we have a second new growth coming up behind my thumb. So we've got a new growth here and we've got a new growth here. So it's trying, yeah? It's just dumped two leaves off of the oldest pseudobulbs. They fell as I picked it up. So it's recovering. It will get there, but it's a long, long way from the plant it once was. A long, long way away. All right, what's next then? What's this one? I haven't picked them up to find out what's what. Ah, now this has always been in my collection as Miltonia Sunset, but it's actually not. There is such a thing as Miltonia Sunset, but the cross was redone a while back and mass produced, so cloned, and they included a Miltoniopsis within it, so it's now officially called Miltonia Sunset. And I've had this plant a very long time and it comes and goes. It's having a moment at the moment where it's recovering. So there's two plants in there. This plant has a new growth and this one round here has a new growth. Both of equal size. They are both producing a few roots, but not that many. It's a struggling plant. I was quite convinced at one point in its past history that it actually had fusarium. It did get treated on several occasions, and it might well be worth, if I remember, to give it another treatment while it's got new growths coming. Yeah? So if there is any resurgence of the dreaded F word, it in theory could stop it getting into those new growths and allow it to grow away. But it's coming on, it's recovering, it's growing, that's the main thing. Right, what else we got then? Then we've got this one, which has a tag that has faded to nothing. So I don't actually know what the hell this is. And I've put it with the Miltonias because I think it is. And this is static. This has done nothing for an incredibly long time. It's got no roots, and all it's got is that tiny little new growth down there. That 1/4 centimetre long, 2 or 3 millimetres. So I'm not quite sure what that's going to do, but it hasn't dropped its leaves. The bulb is desiccated, and it's got no decent roots, and it has a new growth that hasn't moved for some time. So I'm not quite sure what that's going to do. Not a happy bunny and no name. And the last one on that row is actually a zygo, not a Miltonia. Let me just make sure. I'm pretty sure it is. Yeah, that's a zygo. Oh! Right, so now we're on to the bottom shelf, the bigger ones. And the first one on that shelf is a zygo as well. So we'll leave that one where it is and go to this one. Now this one is it's a effectively it's a gift from INSA, but it didn't travel across the water from INSA land. It actually was donated via Burnham's, so it was presented to me at Burnham's, and it was I had a little card with it, said revenge. Quite sure what for, but anyway, it had virtually no roots. It is a climber, which is a pain, and it is Miltonia flavescens. I had one of these for quite a long time and I could not get it to bloom. And every time I go to Burnham's at the right time of year, they've got a stash of them and they're all in bloom. And I'm looking at the environment that they're growing in and everything. That's no different to me. You know, okay, it's a big nursery, but looking at the light, temperatures, you know, and everything. So why didn't mine bloom? So I'm hoping this one will, but it's not going to bloom on the latest two new growths. I'm reasonably certain of that. But as you can see, it has produced some new growths. It's in the throes of maturing these two, and in the meantime it's putting up two more. There's one there and then there's one down in the pot. But it's potted wrong. But these two new growths are now just starting to push some roots out. So this needs to come out of the pot, yeah? Take the media, top part of the media out. There's nothing wrong with that media, it's not old, but it needs to be taken out and the plant needs to be cut off there and the whole plant needs to be moved back to here so that the front end of the plant is sitting on the media and the roots can get into it and effectively do their job. So this is struggling to progress because its only roots are on those new growths and they're not in the media. So this needs some work, which we will get on with soon. It's on the list. On the list. That's that one. The next one isn't a Miltonia, so that'll stay where it is. But I will get rid of that dead leaf because it's annoying me. Ugh, 2 hands required. Gotcha. Right, so this one is next then. Now this is one of those that was divided up into smaller plants and put in here. Since that happened, several of them have rotted and have been taken out. That's why there's a gap. Yeah, they're all around the edge of the pot, which if it will come out without me cussing and swearing, you can see that the larger growths are now producing roots. They are capable of getting in the pot without moving these, because I'd rather not disturb them unless I absolutely have to. But I mean, if you take this particular growth here, that produced a growth there and a growth here, so it produced 2. This one is now producing 2. Yeah, so this one managed to get some roots down and as a consequence is now growing on quite well. This one over here produced 1 new growth. Those roots are the ones we've just looked at. They will get down in the pot. And then this one over here produced a new growth, and so far that one is not doing very well on the old root production, but it is sitting on the media. So I'm not going to disturb this one. This is a spectabile, however you want to say it, hybrid. So it is based on the species spectabile, but there's something in with it, so it's not a pure species. It's just therefore just a hybrid, but it's based on that particular species. The majority of it is probably, what it probably is spectabile crossed with a hybrid. So half of it is spectabile, if you see what I mean. And you could get a situation, just while we're on that, you could get a situation where the species spectabile is crossed with a hybrid that is half spectabile. So it's a spectabile crossed with something else. You've now got a very large percentage of spectabile in the mix. Yeah, that might be what this is, because it is very close to the actual species. So this one's not going to get disturbed. It's going to be left to get going on its own. It's in the Let's Grow Some Roots mix, small bark perlite sphagnum, and I don't think it's been in there too long, but it's okay for these new growths to get their roots going in that mix. Then these can be potted up separately next time round, because this business of putting quite a few plants in a pot is not ideal. So that's that one, and then the last one, again, this is one with lots of water dripping out the bottom, all over my feet in my sandals. Oh, I've just put something back without its black pot as well, which is not a good idea. Right, now this one is the same thing. This is Miltonia morelliana based hybrid. So again, what I just said about that one possibly being the species crossed with a hybrid is highly likely. This one in its heyday got a first at a competition table and was a stunning display at that time. This one is growing. All the pieces in here are growing. I haven't lost any. They're all growing at different stages. Some are doing well, some are a bit behind. It is producing some roots. They are producing some roots. And once most of these new growths are mature, that pot will be full. The media's not old enough to panic yet. What I'm hoping is that these growths stop growing as we get towards winter, which is logical, end of the growing season and all that. If it dares to stick a spike out, it'll get cut straight off. No strength in there to bloom. And the next thing that will happen is to take a dead leaf off. I think that might have come off a plant from above. Not from above, just from the shelf above. Yes, so this one's doing okay. And again, there are quite a few pieces in here, and they will get potted up separately next time round to grow on into individual plants, because that's how I want to progress now. This pot full of several plants is not the best of ideas. Also, a judge that's got their eyes open at the Orchid Societies, if that went on a competition table or into one of our shows to be judged, a judge with their eyes open would see that it's not one plant, and they won't judge it. Because basically it comes down to, well, which one do you want me to judge? If you've got 2 or 3 in a pot, so they won't do it. I had one excluded for that reason, so I know only too well. But there's some roots being produced, and plenty of new growths. It's doing fine. So there ends the Miltonia. To say, out of the types of Oncidium alliance type plants, I've probably got more Miltonias than anything else. Now, as for the other Miltonias, as they're often called, the Miltoniopsis, I now have none. And that includes losing the species that I have, much to my annoyance. My Miltonias suffered badly, and I got told off by my friend Brian. He said, "This is just looking at the video, I just got a comment, your Miltonias are getting too much light, they're too pale." That's it, to the point. And I hadn't realised they were paling, because it happens at a relatively slow rate. And that knocked them for 6 basically. It took a lot of their strength and energy out of the plants. So they don't go in that level of light anymore, they are on lower shelves. They're up the brighter end, but they're not on a top shelf anymore. They were before, they were right up here. In this place, that is right in that sun through the roof. far too bright, too much for them. So we don't do that anymore. But I needed to be told by an observer coming in cold, because I hadn't seen the change, because it's so gradual. So there we go, Miltonias. There's a lot of species. Some of the species have good sized blooms, they're not bad at all, and they can be very rewarding. But like many Oncidium types, they can be susceptible to root loss, normally due to staying wet too long and too wet when they're not actively growing. Yeah? So go steady. But apart from that, they can be quite rewarding. And yeah, that'll do for today. Hope you've enjoyed that. Miltonias ought to be reasonably easy to get hold of if you're in the EU. I don't know about other countries, I can't say for the States, but I'd have thought they'd be okay to get in the States. In suitable climates, they can be grown outside. You know, as long as it doesn't get too cold at night, they'll be fine. Just keep them out in the sun. You know. So, and if you've got a dry climate, if you take a plant outside, the first thing you need to worry about is humidity. Because in some places it might not be that hot, but there's no humidity. It drops right off. They're not going to be happy with that. Yeah? However, in some parts of the world it does get quite warm and the temperatures are fabulous and the humidity is absolutely ridiculous and everything rots. So go steady, check your humidity if you think about moving them outside. Got far more control of humidity in an enclosed space because you can change it, you can alter it. There's not a lot you can do outside really, is there? Look, you rain, will you pack it in? Anyway, I will leave it at that for today, and tomorrow is Everything in Bloom on the 8th, and as I said, it will be the Phalaenopsis Roadshow tomorrow, because that's where the majority of the blooms are. And yeah, thanks for the list of other channels to look at. I haven't started looking at them yet, but tomorrow's my day off apart from filming that Everything in Bloom on the 8th, which is an exception, which probably means I'll take Tuesday off, because I'm not having Monday off like I usually do. And when I take my next day off, I'm going to go through all the comments on that particular video and write down all the channels I don't know. So you have to bear in mind quite a few people recommended channels that I already am subscribed to. So I'm already watching those. Don't necessarily watch every one they produce, but they come up on the list. So I at least get them presented to me. But there's quite a few that some I've never heard of, some I have, and I need to go and look again, because if I've heard of them and I'm not subscribed to them, there may be a reason that for me, that's not a channel for me. But yeah, I'll write them all down and then we'll go and have a look and you know, have a look at a few videos. A lot of what will determine whether it's going to be a channel that I'm going to want to watch is the style. Yeah? I mean, it's difficult to explain. The two that I watch the most videos of, virtually every video they do, are Ed's Orchids, Mixed Masdevallias, who post so rare, you know, I don't see many of those, and Insa. Ed and Insa grow very similar to me, yeah? And I like the style. There's nothing dramatic, there's no acrobatics and stuff. It's just calm and talking about the orchids and stuff. Yeah, and I quite like that. But I will have a look at them all, and I'm hoping to increase the number that I'm subscribed to, because like I said, sometimes there's a whole day and I sort of think there's nothing to watch. I do watch videos about military aircraft. There's a couple of those that post almost every day, so I've always got a bit of that to watch. There's some live sites that I go and have a look at now and again, mainly the osprey nests in the UK. So yeah, I do have other interests, but yeah, that'll do for today. Thanks to everybody who supports the channel. I'll tag that on the end. I'm not going to go into huge details, you know who you are. Watching the videos, don't forget the ads, that's how the money changes hands, and those who do the financial support either on Patreon or membership, YouTube membership. Thanks to everybody who just watches the channel, leaves comments and does the thumbs up. Don't forget that, will you? Don't do it now. Go on, do it. It is very easy to forget, but a reminder at the end, you know, now is the time to do it. I always do it right at the beginning. As soon as I start watching the video, if I get more than 10 seconds in, that gets a thumbs up, even if I don't watch it all. See you next time. Bye for now.